Snow drifted softly outside the window of 56-year-old Margaret Turner's home in Maplewood, a quiet little town nestled under a thick white winter sky. The world outside was calm, no car engines, no footsteps on the frosted sidewalks, just the steady hush of snow settling on rooftops, mailboxes, and bare trees glowing under Christmas lights. Inside her warm, but silent living room, Margaret sat in her favorite rocking chair next to the fireplace. The flames crackled softly, but even their warmth couldn't reach the empty space in her heart. The house, once filled with laughter, tiny footsteps, and the smell of cinnamon cookies, now echoed with memories. She ran her fingers over a faded photograph resting on the mantel, her late husband, James, smiling beside a Christmas tree almost 20 years ago. Behind him stood their children, Emily and Daniel, only teenagers back then. Now they had families of their own, living states away, busy with life, miles away from the traditions they once shared. Margaret whispered to the photo, her voice trembling. "James, Christmas just isn't the same without you, or without them." She stood slowly, her joints stiff but movements gentle, like a page being turned carefully in an old book. The grandfather clock by the hallway chimed softly, reminding her of the passing time. December 21st, 3 days till Christmas. She glanced around the quiet home. No tree. No stockings. No decorations. For the first time in her life, Margaret hadn't unpacked the Christmas boxes from the attic. Because what was Christmas, without family to share it with? She walked to the frosty window, wiping a small circle clear with her sleeve. Across the street, she could see her neighbor's home filled with light, children dancing around a tall Christmas tree. Their laughter floated in the cold wind, a joyful sound that felt like a distant memory. Margaret smiled faintly, though her eyes glistened. She whispered, "Maybe this year, I'll just let Christmas pass quietly." The next morning, Margaret woke up earlier than usual. The sky outside was a pale silver, and sunlight peeked gently through the curtains, painting soft stripes on the wooden floor. The letter from Claire still lay on her bedside table. She stared at it for a long moment, hope and hesitation tangled in her chest. Should I go? After all these years? What if nothing felt the same anymore? What if everyone had moved on? Yet, a quiet voice inside her whispered, "What if it feels like home again?" With a small sigh and a brave smile, Margaret whispered, "All right, let's do this." She climbed the narrow stairs to the attic, the air cold and dusty. The light bulb flickered above, casting golden shadows over the familiar cardboard boxes stacked against the wall. Some were labeled in her late husband's handwriting: Christmas decor, ornaments, lights, stockings, handmade by Mom. Her fingers traced those letters slowly, tenderly. With careful steps, she dragged the first box down. A small puff of dust rose as she opened it. Inside lay her past. A fabric snowman missing one button eye. Handmade ornaments painted by Emily and Daniel when they were kids, tiny fingerprints still visible under the glitter. A knitted red stocking with her husband's initials, JT. She held the stocking close to her chest. For a moment, her eyes welled up, but this time, it wasn't just sadness. It was gratitude, for memories that still lived. By afternoon, the house was slowly coming alive. The Christmas tree stood beside the fireplace, slightly crooked, but shining with silver and gold ornaments. Warm yellow fairy lights draped around it like gentle stars. Cinnamon-scented candles flickered on the windowsill. Margaret played soft carols on the old radio, crackly but comforting. As Silent Night filled the room, she whispered, "James, I hope you're smiling right now." Just then, ring. Ring. The phone rang. Margaret hesitated, then answered softly, "Hello? Mom? December 23rd arrived with a bright winter sun glittering over Maplewood. The world looked like it had been dipped in powdered sugar, white rooftops, frosted trees, and chimneys releasing thin curls of smoke into the cold, crisp air. Inside Margaret's little house, something had changed. For the first time in years, it felt alive. The Christmas tree now glowed with golden lights, ornaments shimmered with memories, and the smell of freshly baked cinnamon cookies drifted from the kitchen. Margaret, wearing a soft cream cardigan and her favorite wool socks, carefully placed a nativity set on the fireplace mantel. She stepped back, looked at her handiwork, and smiled. Just then, ding-dong. The doorbell rang. Her heart skipped. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, a gust of cold wind carried tiny snowflakes into the hallway, and beyond them stood a little boy with rosy cheeks and a toothy grin. Nana. It was her grandson, Oliver, no more than 6 years old. Before Margaret could even speak, he ran into her arms, giggling as his snow boots left tiny footprints on the wooden floor. Oliver? Sweetheart, you're here? Margaret laughed, lifting him slightly even though her back protested. Behind him stood Emily, her daughter, holding a sleeping toddler bundled in a fluffy pink coat. And next to her, Emily's husband, Michael, smiling warmly, holding gift bags and luggage. We wanted to surprise you, Emily said softly. We thought, maybe you shouldn't spend Christmas alone. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, happy, trembling tears. She hugged her daughter tightly. Thank you. I can't believe you're here. Emily glanced inside the house, eyes widening. You decorated everything. Mom, it looks beautiful. Just like when we were kids. Margaret chuckled softly. I had a little encouragement from an old friend's letter. They walked inside. Oliver ran toward the Christmas tree, gasping dramatically. Whoa. Nana. This tree is huge. Are those real cookies? December 24th arrived. Crisp, clear, and glowing with the soft promise of Christmas Eve. The sky turned pink at dawn, and the world outside seemed to hold its breath in stillness. Inside, the Turner house was alive with the sound of children running, pots clinking in the kitchen, and soft carols floating through the air. Margaret stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, hands slightly trembling as she fastened a simple silver locket around her neck, the one James had gifted her on their first Christmas as husband and wife. Inside it was a tiny photo of the two of them, young and full of dreams. She touched it gently. Downstairs, Emily appeared at the door and smiled. Mom, you look beautiful. Margaret laughed softly, brushing a stray gray hair from her cheek. Oh, stop. I look like a Christmas cookie that got left in the oven too long. Emily shook her head. Dad would have loved to see you like this. Silence filled the room, but it wasn't empty, it was full of love. By 5:30 p.m., they bundled up in coats, gloves, and scarves. Snow crunched beneath their boots as they walked to the Maplewood Community Hall, just a few streets away. The building glowed with golden lights, a wreath hanging proudly on its wooden door, just as it had when Margaret was a teenager attending winter dances here. She paused before entering, heart racing. What if they don't recognize me? What if time has changed everything? Emily gently squeezed her hand. They're your people, Mom. They're waiting. Margaret nodded and pushed open the door. Warmth hit her immediately, laughter, music, the smell of hot chocolate and pine. And then she heard it. Maggie? She turned. There stood Claire Henderson, gray curls, twinkling eyes, wearing a red scarf and tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. Behind her was Linda, Harold, Tommy, and June, the group she once called family. For a second, no one moved. Then Claire rushed forward and wrapped her in a tight, trembling hug. You came, Claire whispered. Margaret's voice cracked. I wasn't sure if I still belonged. Claire pulled back slightly, holding her face in both hands. You never stopped belonging. You were just gone for a while. One by one, each friend hugged her. Harold joked, still shorter than all of us, Maggie. Tommy added, but still the prettiest. They all laughed. Tears mixed with smiles. The evening unfolded like a song long forgotten. The hall was decorated with twinkling fairy lights, red ribbons, paper snowflakes made by local school kids. Tables were covered with homemade pies, gingerbread, casseroles, and steaming apple cider. Kids ran around playing tag, mothers chatted over coffee, old couples danced slowly near the gramophone playing, "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." Margaret sat with her old friends at a round table covered with a lace cloth. They talked for hours. About James. About Claire's knee surgery. About Harold's silly new hobby of knitting dog sweaters. About the time they snuck into the school gym to practice their Christmas choir performance in 1974. They laughed until their sides hurt. Then came the quiet moment. Claire placed her hand softly over Margaret's. "We missed you. After James died, you just disappeared, Maggie. Why didn't you call us?" Tears filled Margaret's eyes. "Because I didn't know how to live in a world where he didn't exist, and I was afraid if I came back, you'd all see how broken I was." Claire squeezed her hand. "Honey, broken people are exactly who Christmas is for." For the first time in years, Margaret didn't cry from loneliness, but from being seen, understood, loved. The night deepened, and the Maplewood Community Hall glowed like a lantern in the snow. Laughter echoed across the wooden floors, soft music floated through the air, and everywhere you looked, there was warmth. The smell of cinnamon, pine, peppermint cocoa, and fresh gingerbread cookies wrapped the hall like a cozy blanket. Margaret stood near the Christmas tree at the center of the room. Its lights glittered across the glass ornaments, casting tiny dancing reflections on her face. She could hear children giggling near the cookie table, adults clinking cups of hot cider, and old friends quietly humming to the tune of "O Holy Night." For a moment, she closed her eyes and breathed in the moment. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. "Attention, everyone." The voice of Harold boomed from the stage. He stood beside an old wooden microphone, a Santa hat crooked on his head. "Before we get to dessert, and before the kids attack the presents, I think it's time for a tradition we've all missed." Claire stepped up beside him with a smile. "The Maplewood Christmas Choir, featuring someone we haven't heard in a long time." Dozens of heads turned toward Margaret. Her heart skipped. "Oh no, 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 I haven't sung in years," she whispered to Emily. Emily squeezed her hand gently. "Mom, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you." The room waited. Slowly, heart pounding, Margaret walked to the stage. She stood there, under the warm glow of fairy lights. Claire took her hand and whispered, "Just like old times." The music began, soft piano, the opening chords of "Silent Night." Margaret took a breath. At first, her voice trembled like a snowflake in the wind. "Silent night, holy night." But then, something shifted. Her voice grew steadier, soft, warm, filled with years of love, loss, and hope. The hall fell silent. No one moved. Some closed their eyes. Others held hands. Children paused mid-cookie bite. Even Emily, standing near the tree, by the second verse, other voices joined in, Claire, Linda, Harold, and soon, the entire hall was singing. Not perfectly, but beautifully. Together. Margaret looked up slightly, eyes shimmering, and whispered in her heart. "James, this song is for you." When the last note faded, the hall burst into gentle applause, not loud, but full of love. Little Oliver ran to the stage, shouting, "That was my Nana. She sings like an angel." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Margaret picked him up, hugging him tightly. Then came the sound that every child waited for. Ho! 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 Merry Christmas! The doors swung open, and in walked Santa Claus. Well, actually Mr. Robert, the retired postman, wearing a fluffy red suit and carrying a sack of gifts. Children squealed with excitement and rushed forward. Oliver tugged Margaret's sleeve. "Come on, Nana. Santa's here." She followed him to the big Christmas tree, where Santa began calling out names and handing gifts. Oliver received a wooden train set, Sophie got a plush snowman. Other children squealed with joy as ribbons and wrapping paper flew through the air. Then, something unexpected happened. "This one is for Margaret Turner. Santa held out a small, delicately wrapped box. Surprised, Margaret took it. Hands trembling, she opened the lid. Inside lay a tiny silver bell on a red ribbon, and a note. For every Christmas you thought you were forgotten. For every silent night you spent alone. May this bell remind you, you were always loved. From your old friends, who never stopped waiting. Margaret pressed the bell close to her heart as tears ran down her cheeks, but they were warm, healing tears. She whispered, "Thank you. All of you." The night continued with music, dancing, and stories. Margaret danced slowly with Emily, then with little Oliver, who stood on her feet and giggled until his cheeks hurt. Old friends toasted to new memories and old souls. Kids fell asleep in their mothers' laps. The fireplace crackled softly as the night settled in. The kids were finally asleep upstairs, their giggles replaced by calm breathing. Soft fairy lights glowed across the living room, casting warm golden tones over the old photo frames and Christmas ornaments. Margaret sat quietly on the couch, an unopened envelope trembling in her hands. Her daughter, Emily, noticed and gently asked, "Mom, are you okay?" Margaret smiled faintly. This letter came today. It's from Michael." The room fell silent. Michael Turner,